Welcome back to one more episode of Motivators Podcast. I am joined today with one of my favorite people, Christina Torres from ABA Made Easy. I adore you, and I'm so happy that we have the opportunity today to finally, because we've been planning this for a while, to finally sit down and
I know.
talk and get to know you a little bit better and give some knowledge to the people about schools as well. So, without further ado, I would love for you to introduce yourself to whoever doesn't know you from our community and tell us a little bit about your journey, please.
Yes, I'm so excited to do this podcast with you guys. Like Mark mentioned, we've been working on this for a while, and it's so nice to finally be a part of it, right? So, my name is Christina Torres. I am a BCBA here in Connecticut, and I am behind the platform ABA Made Easy with an E and a Z on social media. I've been on in the field of ABA and autism for the past 10 years. And I really am so passionate about, disseminating the science and really being able to support the future leaders of the field by utilizing social media and really supporting and navigating new people that are new to the field or like they're not aware of what ABA is. So I like to use my platform to really help explain things in layman's terms. By providing visual models and resources for people to better understand the science since it's very hard to consume. But yeah, I've been in the field for 10 years. I have experience working in the schools, in the home, in residential settings, in the community, consulting. And then I went ahead and decided to establish my own business. And now I offer digital resources, mentorships, CEUs, and I like to go live with my community and answer questions and just be that mentor that I wish I
Oh,
had in the
I love
fields.
that. It's amazing. And I know I say this a few times to you, but like seeing ABA Made Easy grow and seeing you flourish just on social media and even being present in the conferences and all of that. It's such a pleasure to see you like just getting that venture and just blossoming. It's incredible. So I'm really, really, really proud of you. It's amazing.
Thank you. And guys, if you don't know, I just launched my business not too long ago. And Mark, you
Mhm.
found me last year. So it's been a year of us
Yes.
collaborating and reaching out and catching up. And you, especially with the marketing that Motivity does, you guys are so empowering and you guys leave such sweet, reinforcing
Thank you.
comments. And you guys saw my platform a while ago and you believed in me. And it's so cool to see how we both
But
evolved, right? Like, especially with social
yeah,
media and where
it's
it's
funny
going.
because I think this is a topic that we're going to end up having on another episode because I feel like you and I, we share a lot of that mindset on social media, which is all about positive reinforcement and really be there for people and have a word of wisdom, a word of advice so people don't feel alone. Because I think internet sometimes, 100%.
Empowerment.
I feel like the internet can be such a place for escape, but it is nice when it can feel like home, a place as well of safety where you can go and know that you have your community there to help. So that's the power of social media for sure.
Yes. And the community is the big
Hmm.
piece, right? I'm all about
Yes.
community building because we have such a niche field and it could be lonely in this field, especially like when you understand behavior and you understand our terminology and you understand like the backlash that we get online. It's like, this doesn't translate
Yeah.
well in English, but having a safe place to come to know that other people understand your perspective is so needed. And I'm so excited to be able to provide that
Yeah,
to
and
my
I'm happy that
community.
you're there to help people out. That's amazing. So I wanted to know a little bit. You worked in various settings. You said you worked at home, schools, clinics. But since we're going to be talking a little bit about schools today, I wanted to know what is the most exciting thing to you about working in a school environment?
I think what's most exciting working in a school environment, there's a lot of pros and cons to any environment, but I think being a part of that multidisciplinary team is super exciting and it's important. And you get to learn the perspectives of other professionals, and you really get to create and cater programs and support for that individual learner. Especially like since we're working one to one, supporting our learners throughout the day, it's important for us to collaborate and carry over
Mm.
and generalize the skills that they're working on with other providers throughout their work, throughout the school week naturalistically.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
So what's been your experience so far with schools? Like, can you talk a little bit about like your progress on that?
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest, guys. Depending on where you live, it is going to look different everywhere. I'm in Connecticut. Between working as a BCBA, but also working as a one to one, I have worked in about 10 different schools,
Wow.
different districts, and ABA looks different in every single one of them. And I'm in Connecticut. So my first exposure, I thought my baseline experience to school was it was the best thing ever. I thought that was typical. Like we had our own classroom, we had a sped teacher, we had a BCBA that was there all together. All the kids had a one-to-one. The BCBA and the special teacher collaborated on the curriculum. They all had their individualized curriculum. We did circles. Everything was amazing. And I thought that was standard. And then the contract got outbought, so they replaced us. And then I went to a whole nother school, and it's like, what the heck? What? It's not what I thought that was. Like, it was so crazy. So the different experiences in the school setting that I've had were that specific, where the collaboration was there. Everyone had individualized plans. Everything was catered specifically for that classroom. And then I've worked in a magnet school too, where our our job, what do you call that,
Okay.
the company that I was working for had only two learners that they were supporting. So we had our pull out room, and we would do our programs, and then we'd go in the classroom, support in the classroom. So we worked one to one, and then the BCBA would just show up once a week. And then I've also worked in a school where we were outsourced for support, where we were actually brought in to train the
Mm.
paras. And then eventually they canceled that out, and they wanted us to work directly with our learners. So it's like, okay, now we're in the school working directly with that one kid. So if that kid is out sick, then we're not going to the school. So we don't have to stay in the school. So the school setting looks different in every single scenario. And the responsibilities looks different, and the expectation is also something that kind of gets like wonky of like, who's the supervisor of
Mm.
the RBT, who's making the change, who's collaborating, who's this, who's that. So it could get really messy
Do
in the
you
school system
think
too.
so? Do you, I mean, I could see that things being different can be there. There could be an aspect of excitement, but do you think it would be better to have everything standardized and have all the same in all different schools have the same way of doing it, or do you think it's beneficial or it's essential because obviously every learner is different? But do you think it's beneficial that it's different in every school?
See, that's tricky because I know here in Connecticut they're trying to change like
Hmm.
legislation and all that stuff in regards to the BCBA's rules. Because if you're like a school district BCBA, I was never a school district BCBA, but the lack of understanding of our roles
Hmm.
as BCBAs needs to be shared a lot more. You know what I mean? But when it comes to like standard, it's so different. It's so individualized. And also too, there's so many variables to
Hmm.
be mindful of, right? Does your learner have their own safe space, like their own DTI room, their own room? If they have high rates of behavior, is there a safe place to transition them, or there is no space for them? So now you have to be mindful of like, okay, what are we going to do when we're having a behavior? You know what I mean? Like, it's so tricky, and I think we need to bring more awareness of what
Hmm.
our roles are as BCBAs, but also better understanding of how ABA can support the teachers and the learners in the school in
Interesting.
general.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on. Well, I'm gonna
Hmm.
transition to transitions in ABA in school settings. Sorry, guys. In case you don't know, I am a little bit sick if you cannot hear by my voice. So bear with me with that. Christina has been kind enough to bear with me on this conversation while I'm sick. But basically, I wanted to ask with transition planning, we know that it's important for students. But what are some factors that you think will make a successful transition? Like whether it's between grade
Yes.
schools
Oh my gosh,
or
I love
even
that you said
adulthood.
that
Yeah,
because
sorry.
listen, yeah, no, so it's like, what is your operational definition of transition? Because in the school setting, guys, transitions are literally from point
Hmm.
A to point B to point B. Okay. The transition from getting out the car to walking in the hallway to getting to the classroom, that is right there is like four transitions, especially if your learner is prone to have behaviors, or like they're impulsive and they want to go this way. Like transitions, there's hundreds of transitions throughout the day. Okay, transitioning, especially my expertise is early intervention in elementary school. Okay, so like transitioning from the carpet back to the desk. Some learners have very
Mm-hmm.
difficult time with that, right? Also, too, transitioning between service providers, and especially like scheduling. Oh, we have so and so at 3:30. Oh, and it just so happens to be right after a highly preferred activity, which is like recess. So leaving a highly preferred activity to go work with a provider that could potentially have issues transitioning because now they don't want to leave recess and just having fun. So there's a lot of things to be mindful of when it comes to transitioning, and proactive measures and things to prepare your learner, but also the staff that is supporting them,
Got it.
right? So like having a schedule, and that's another thing too in the school, depending on your school and depending on the service providers, the school could go by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or they're going to go by A day, B day, C
Oh
day, D
wow.
day. So if there's no school on Monday and Monday's the E day, then on Tuesday, it's the next day. So if they don't typically have speech on
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, you see what I mean? Like having a visual schedule. I wish I printed one out, but I would always like write down every single transition throughout the day so that we could be prepared to prime our student, like, oh, 5 more minutes. Oh, after this, we're going to go and so, to be able to help support the staff, but also our learner when it comes to transitioning in the schools. And then in the middle school, oh my goodness, I give props to everybody in the middle school, guys, because you go from having support from a learner that's in elementary school, that's in the same classroom with the same students, with the same teacher every day, 6.5 hours a
Yeah.
day, 5 days a week, to now having to learn how to navigate 7 different hallways, 7 different classrooms, 7 different teachers, 7 different personalities, 7 different classrooms with 25, 30 plus
Mm-hmm.
other kids. You see how crazy
Yeah.
transitions could be and how it's
Yeah.
important to support? That's a whole
So
other topic.
talking about support, like, do you think, obviously now we're going to come into data collection with this, but what role do you think that data collection can have playing, like, to support those transitions and make them more effective and evidence based?
Yeah, so we actually take a lot of data on we take data on so much, and if a learner has difficulty with transitioning, then obviously you would want to take data on, oh, did he transition without maladaptive behaviors, plus or minus? And now that we have a frequency count and a baseline of like, okay, well, on average he's about 30 transitions a day, and we look at the graph and we could see, oh, it's peaked up and we've inserted this strategy and now we see a decrease in it. You know what I mean? It's like now we'll be able to actually see if the progress is with transitioning is actually being effective based off of the interventions that we get to apply and insert to support our kids. So having something in place to be able to track things, because stuff happens over time. It's not like, oh, we're going to put this in
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, it works. No,
Yeah.
that's not how that works. And depending on your learner, everything is so
Mm-hmm.
individualized. A learner could pick something up in the same day, or it could
True.
take months.
So when you tell me, when you were talking now a little bit about transitions, it just seems like there's like a lot of collaboration that I feel like it could go on, and even collaboration, but as well like support between different types of people. So how can BCBAs collaborate with educators, but as well families, to create smoother transitions to students? Because I believe that it goes beyond classroom, correct?
Yes, we are all a team, guys. You got to involve the parents. Parents, okay? And one of the things that's so important, that's also kind of like a tricky topic, right? Because I see it often online is like, oh, do you give parents your phone number? Or should the parents be able to text the staff? I would absolutely recommend it. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? To be able to be mindful of like, hey, just letting you know he had a tough morning, or he's sick, he's not showing up today, or like, hey, I'm having a hard time, I need support to help him get out of the car. You see what I mean? Like having open communication with the parent is so monumental. But also too, it's like we want to support our parents. If they're having difficulty with transitioning, just getting the learner into the school, you want to be mindful of that to be able to support that. And then also too, you want to be able to report that with staff, like,
Mm,
hey, so and so is having a tough morning. But also too, anyone else that's a part of their team, like if they have a social worker or the sped teacher or a counselor or speech, you want to be able to have that open line of communication so everyone is proactive, like, hey, he's having a tough day, maybe
mhm.
not be too hard on him with the amount of demands or tasks during your session, to make sure that everyone is supporting him with
Yeah,
the
because one of the
transition. You know what I
things of
mean?
like data collection, like for example with Motivity, like we have like data. That could be a great way as well to communicate. If someone doesn't feel very comfortable giving the phone number, you can always leave notes,
Mm-hmm.
and parents can leave notes. The BTs can leave notes, the BCBAs can leave notes, or even speech can leave notes. It's super important to as well, like whoever doesn't feel comfortable with that option of leaving their number, I think that's always a good way as well to be able to stay in communication.
Yeah, you want to streamline the form of communication so everyone is aware and on the same
Yeah.
page. Like the notes section is huge. It's make sure you read the
Yes.
notes, right? It's like read the notes before so and so. Like read the notes, guys, because you never know things might change or
True.
you know to be proactive and mindful to better support your learner, but ultimately to better support you
True.
in your
No,
session,
100%
right?
because school and home are two different environments, and a lot can happen in those few hours that you're in between. The hours that you're in school, the hours that
Hmm.
you're at home, something can happen to the student that you want to let the other team know. So I think this is why collaboration is so important, and everything you're saying makes total sense. But with the multidisciplinary
Hmm.
collaboration, you and I talked a little bit about it. Um, we know that it can be challenging, definitely, right? Like collaboration across different disciplines. But since you have your experience, what strategies do you think you found over time effective for building those relationships in a stronger level between BCBAs, teachers, therapists, and even administrators?
Hmm. I think it's important to let everyone, their perspective be
Mm-hmm.
heard, right? As behavioral analysts, we're all like, what's the operational definition? Evidence based.
Yeah.
Here's the TA. Here's the prerequisites, So being able to validate their perspective, but also opening up the line of communication of how can we collaborate more effectively where we can you have this goal, I have this goal, how can we combine it in a way that's supportive and we both understand the roles of each other, without when not overstepping or feeling like, well, I don't like so and so, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that. It's like we all are coming from a professional lens, and at the end of the day, we are here to be a part of that learner's individual team. And based off of our assessments and your assessments, you're requesting this, we're requesting that. So how can we come together so that we can build this perfect plan to support them throughout their work week? So being in a position to really advocate for your perspective, but also be open to finding a way to
Mm-hmm.
blend things, especially if it's like a similar target, but also being open to having conversations to explain why this strategy might work, and learning more from their perspective on the reasons why they might pick one
Uh-huh.
thing over another.
Yeah, no,
You see what I mean? So it's not like I'm right and you're wrong. It's like, okay, we have both of these positions. How can we blend them so that it
I,
works
I totally
effectively?
agree with you. I always say, even in the normal day to day lives, if I have an argument with someone, I always say that it's not about me bringing them to my side or them bringing me to theirs. It's about meeting in the middle. And especially in situations like this where we
Hmm.
have a child involved, at the end of the day, it's what's best for the child. And I think it's important to explore um, all
Yep.
strategies to see the better outcome. But we were talking about
Hmm.
how ABA is small, and there's a lot of misunderstanding, unfortunately. You've had the experience on this. How do you address that resistance or the misunderstanding that comes with ABA? That sometimes people, you go into a new school and the teams they're not familiar with it. Like, how do you address that? What's your advice?
Yeah, it's really trying to wording things in a way that's not so jargony, but putting it in a perspective of like understanding, especially from like a behavioral analytic lens, right? It's like, okay, well, if this is the terminal goal that you want to get to, how can we break it down? Because, our learners, we have to still build
Mm,
these skills. So kind of like breaking it down in a way that they could understand and how like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes
mm,
sense. You know what I mean? So it really is trying to build a relationship. You always want to build rapport with anyone that's on the team. Have conversations throughout the week, not just at the meetings. Like ask how's the sessions going. Is there anything that you could do? Like, can you want me to model? He's
uh-huh.
on a token board. You know what I mean? Like being in the session. Always ask them dumb like, oh, how can I apply what you're doing outside, so that you also seem interested in what they're doing
Hmm.
because you should be, but also being excited to collaborate and work together. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to learn your skills and your expertise too. And it's like we should be excited to see each other, and how can we help build the
I'm
skills to help
getting
support our kids,
goosebumps right now. I wish I could show it over my jacket, but it is. I'm such a firm believer, like what you're saying right now. I think collaboration is such a beautiful thing, and again, goes back into the community sense that you and I vouch so much for. But it is like people. I wish I could learn more. Like I'm always so open to learn other skills from other people, and even if it's not my department, I'm just like, oh, so what does this mean, or what does this do, or how do you do this? Like, I think it's so knowledge is so valuable that you can then just look back and think, okay, I'm not in the complete darkness. I think if we bring people a little bit into our world and we take as well a step into theirs, if we're not as dark, then it's not as scary. I think sometimes people when don't understand things, they get scared, and that when there can be a little bit of resistance. But
hmm
hopefully, people are able to converse and get their point across. But what would be one advice, like one piece of advice that you would give school teams that could be listening to us today, that they're looking to implement a multidisciplinary approach? Like, how would you say that they could do that effectively?
yeah, it's if you are unsure about something, ask, right? It's like,
Hmm.
well, what's your reasoning behind it? Like, there's always a reason behind something, and our science is so complex. Like, be open to asking questions. You know what I mean? Like, oh, can you, validate perspectives? Like, okay, I'm not sure, what does that mean? Could you explain that better? Like, don't be afraid to not under to advocate and not understand. Like,
Hmm.
can you explain what the schedules of this means? Like, we have so much big words that we have to remember that we have to explain it
Hmm.
in layman's terms so that everyone is on the same page, because what we're doing needs to be generalized, right? And especially when you have a service provider that's, let's say, that they have
Yeah.
speech on Tuesdays for 30 minutes and they're working on prepositions. You really think that 30-minute speech of him learning prepositions is going to be able to be generalized throughout the week? No. That's why it's important to collaborate. Okay, you're working on prepositions, ins and in and out. I'll make sure to generalize throughout his week. Oh, we're going to put it in the folder. Can you put it in
Hmm.
naturalistically so that he's getting exposed to a lot of more learning opportunities, especially since we get to work with them longer duration, right? It's not just 30 minutes on Tuesday, it's longer duration. So being able to have open communication and understanding, hey, I'm going to
Hmm.
generalize what you're working on whenever I have an opportunity to do it, so that our learner is having is able to contact multiple exposures and experiences to build on that skill outside of
Hmm.
just Tuesday session. So putting things in that way of like, and also asking like, oh, if you're working on this, like, is there anything that you want me to work on throughout the week, or to focus on, so that they feel like they're heard, but also too, it's like you're modeling what it's like to be on a team. We're all on the same team here, which is that learner. So how can we work together so that he's able to contact, or she is able to contact, all these learning opportunities naturalistically
I
to
love
practice
that.
those
Great
skills?
advice. Okay, we're at Motivity, so we love data. You know that about us. And I wanted to ask you some data collection questions that I was wondering when I was thinking about schools, which is basically like,
Yeah.
how do you strike the right balance, for example, between collecting meaningful data, but then as well minimizing disruptions in the classroom because it's such a busy environment, right?
And I'm glad you asked that, because remember I was telling you it looks so different in
Yeah.
every school. So I've worked where I had my little clipboard and we had the IEP goals and our goals, and it was paper and pen and like plus P1, P2 check mark. I've also worked where I had a data collection software and an iPad. It's plus minus throughout the sessions. I have also worked in an environment where we're not taking
Wow.
any data. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? It's like, okay, we're just there to support and there's no data taken. And it's like, okay, just the data that the teacher takes whenever she's doing her
Uh-huh.
assessments and all that stuff. So it's like, now I'm not taking any data. So it's so important to have some form of data collection so that you can reference to see if there's progress, to see if there's anything if it's stagnant, if it's increasing, if things are decreasing, so that we can analyze it and make effective changes
Yeah,
as needed,
super
you know?
important. But then, like, so how can ABA providers, like you, for example, and schools work together to streamline that data collection without overwhelming the teachers? Because it's what we were saying, right? Like, sometimes it's brand new for them, and
Mhm.
you know, some can might some might have some resistance, some might just not know much about it. So how do you make this whole
Yeah.
process slightly less overwhelming for them?
More reinforcing to and
Mm-hmm.
motivating, right? When it comes to data, and you gotta there's so many variables to be mindful of, right? It's like, okay, does the learner have a one-to-one? Then maybe the one-to-one is better fit to be able to provide to track data, especially since they're supporting them throughout the day, right? Is it just a teacher? So maybe you wanna lower the response effort so that the teacher is not like, oh, frequency count. Maybe do a durational piece, like, okay, every 30 minutes, if you see him get up, just mark a tally and
Mm-hmm.
then put a little timer, or like have a little clicker. You want to make the response effort lower for the teacher, especially depending on, do they have support or do they not have support? So in regards to data collection, like how to collaborate, it's like, okay, how can I make this so easy, but also, and also too, you could set it up so that it's like, okay, just
Yeah.
during reading time,
Mm-hmm.
focus on this. You know what I mean? Like it's a 6.5 hour day. There's 30 kids. There's a lot to deal with. Like, how can you support the teacher in a way where it's like, okay, what areas are we struggling with most? Reading, okay, during reading, just have this little clicker or like have this little tally mark or the timer, and boom, boom, boom. That's it. You know what I mean? And then eventually, once they feel confident and comfortable, then we could go to another section and like break things down so that eventually they have exposure and they have better understanding
Mm-hmm.
of how to collect data. Um, and then we can kind of go from there. So you want to make the response effort lower for the teacher, absolutely. But also you want to make it meaningful that we're taking data to be able to make effective
So
changes.
kind of summing it up. Oh, sorry, summoning. Oh my god. Yeah. See, this is when someone is sick. But basically, summarizing
Summarizing.
this topic, basically, like we summarized the topic before, what would be your advice for schools that are new to integrating ABA based data collection into their practices?
Definitely, hopefully you're receiving
Mm-hmm.
training, right? And also too, the goals that we do, they need to be they you should be able to read the goals and
Mm-hmm.
understand what you're taking data on. So it's like, oh, like examples and non-examples. So they should be written in a way that it's easy for you to comprehend and know, like, oh, is this a frequency count, meaning like a tally mark? Is this a durational one? Like, oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
based off of time, you know? So in regards to any tips and tricks is like understanding what type of data collection that you're actually targeting, because they all look different, frequency, durational, and then also too is understanding what counts and what doesn't, so that you could be mindful of like, okay, let me give them credit for this, or this is negative. There were
Yeah.
some errors here. So having some training and having programs that are really easy to understand how to implement is going to be crucial. It's not like you shouldn't be reading something like, oh my gosh, what does this mean, or how do I what's right or wrong. Like it should be written in a way that you can understand
Do
what
you
you're taking
have,
data on.
sorry, do you have any story that you remember from working in a school environment? Any memory that still?
I have so many. Oh my gosh, and that's why so my first
Uh,
mandated reporter. I think everyone should kind of hear a mandated because, I'm not sure if everyone ever has an opportunity to be a mandated reporter, and hopefully you don't like,
mm,
it doesn't have to happen. But my first one was he
mm,
was in first grade, and we to make a long story short, his
oh,
grandmother passed away. And so he wanted to go to heaven. And so he was discussing like he's going to use this specific thing in the kitchen and you know what I mean?
mm,
And it's like, oh my gosh, he had a
mm,
terrible night. Yeah. And it's like, as a mandated reporter, mom told me, and I told my supervisor, and then I spoke with his
uh-huh,
social worker. So we were able to immediately create a plan. She created a social story. Social story is
mm,
not evidence based, but it's like being able to collaborate as a team to be able to have all of us work together to support him during this transition, to understand like what's reality
mm.
and what's fake.
Yeah,
You see what I mean? It's like it was so sad to have to experience that, but it was so important to understand like, wow, we need everyone on board on the same team to understand what he's
hmm,
going through right now, to better support him and mom at home of
absolutely.
managing this. So that's why it's so important, guys, to have open communication with
Yeah.
the families, parents, caregivers, speak to everyone that's on a team. Like, how can we support them better? He has you today. This happened. Like, you know what I mean? So that everyone's on the same page and mindful of how to support our kids, especially every day is different. So we have to individualize everything in the moment. And at that moment, we had to
Especially,
focus on that.
Sorry.
So,
No, especially because the work that you do in the
yeah.
class is going to reflect, you know, it has this wave effect that it's just going to reflect at home too. So, you know, the children's life doesn't end at the classroom, you know. So all that they learn, it's going to be
Mm-mm.
used during the normal days, like after school hours, weekends. So it's kind of crazy when you look back and you think, wow, the impact that your job has, you know, like the incredible
Mm-hmm.
influence you're going to have on this person's life, like adulthood, just from now
Yeah.
being a kid. I mean, already schools shape up the future, but here you're shaping up, you know, progress, which I think it's fantastic. Um,
And I think it's important too to
mhm,
be mindful, right? It's like our full-time job is supporting the specific learner. So we are the ones guiding them and shaping their behaviors and working on
yeah,
emotional regulation, working on flexibility, working on advocacy, understanding, right? Because mom and dad are working until 5 o'clock. Like, where else are they going to have all this opportunity to be exposed
yeah,
in a social setting, but also to contact these opportunities to learn to be flexible, right? Oh my God, in the school setting, guys, you have to be understanding, like, as the adults and the caregivers, we are the ones modeling the behaviors that are shaping our
yeah,
students' future. You know what I mean? And helping them guide them, especially emotional regulation is huge, you know? Like that specific learner, not only did he have autism, he also had ODD and he almost had split
wow,
personality disorder. And he had ADHD. So when I tell you in the beginning of the school year, he was not able to even stand 5 minutes in the classroom, and it wasn't until
hmm,
around February was he was actually staying the whole entire class and the whole entire time. Like we would only go to his room whenever he needed a break or like after recess to play a game. But that's what I'm saying. Shaping takes time, guys. It's not overnight. All right. So you have a learner that can't last 5 minutes and he's got to stay 6.5 hours a day in one classroom. You see what I mean? It's like it's
yeah,
a shaping process and so many things to be mindful of. That's why collaboration and
yeah.
communication is
I
so
think the
important.
key word as well, at least for me, is grace. Like, be patient with yourself, because as a professional, it's easy to, you know, get in your head and think about your skills and the science and all of that, but just be gracious to yourself, give yourself grace, and just think that it takes time, it takes patience, it takes care. You know, like people say, Rome wasn't built in a day. Well, a garden definitely is not built in a day. You know, like it takes a long time. So those flowers will flourish for sure. We're talking about future.
Yes.
Where do you see, Christina, the future of ABA in schools settings, like heading to in like the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, honestly, I'm seeing a lot of BCBAs opening up their own like ABA school
Interesting.
based like program. And yes, I know. And it gets me so excited because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Mm,
It's like being able to individualize the support needed because
mm,
I'm going to be honest, Mark. There is so much wasted time
mm,
in the school. There is so much wasted time in the school. I'm telling you guys. So being able to like to see in the next 5 years like more ABA based school settings, more BCBA owned smaller I know in Florida like you could have like little like I forgot what they call them, but they're like little school hubs and it's like only 5 clients, yes, 5 students. But moving forward, I honestly feel like there needs to be more understanding of the role of a BCBA, especially understanding of like, okay, you don't like one BCBA for the school district is unimaginable. It's like, how are you going to be able to really support the teachers, but ultimately our learners if you have one BCBA responsible for four
yeah.
different school districts? Like, but also BCBAs advocating for themselves too. I think is important, especially in the schools, to better understand our roles and how we can support the teachers and our staff. So hopefully in the next couple years, we get to see a
Hmm,
really huge shift in that because BCBAs can have a monumental change in supporting the teachers in the classrooms and also
hmm.
the students.
I know that you said something as well with the fact that, like, you know, BCBA, the role of a BCBA, and understanding a little bit more of the science behind it. You know, teachers and other parts of the team getting to understand a little bit more about the science of ABA can be a big change. But besides that, what other policy changes or advocacy efforts do you believe that could improve the ABA services in schools?
I think if the students were able to actually have like an RBT
Hmm.
instead of a para as a one-to-one, I think that'll be crucial, especially since we're coming with more extensive training, but also like data collection. Data
Yeah.
collection is huge, right? So having someone that's more understanding of how to collect the data, understanding how to use ABA skill sets and principles. So more of that kind of like training of like who exactly is going to support the one-to-one. Um, I think that'll
Hmm.
be a great direction in the field of the school. But also too, like, you know, a lot of ABAs going around in the school. So like even like group contingencies for teachers, like really kind of like showing teachers how to use like ABA simple strategies for them to really implement and understand like, oh, this is actually pretty cool and
Yeah.
pretty low effort to do. Um, so yeah, I think those are some things to be
Amazing.
mindful of.
And now, how can BCBAs better support the educators in making data informed instructional decisions? Do you have any advice on that?
Honestly, I feel like it really comes down to
Hmm.
communicating, right? Providing rationales to why we want to try this approach before we change everything all over the place. Like for instance, I remember listen, and when it comes to
Uh,
multidisciplinary team, guys, it is difficult to get everyone on the same page. All right. When I tell you, and especially in the middle school, guys, oh, 7 different teachers, okay. Do you really think you're going to be able to get 7 different teachers to implement a behavior intervention plan?
yeah.
Like it's very difficult, guys. So, and especially too, like the concept of
Hmm.
elopement, for example, a little off topic, but like elopement with one of my clients, you know what that looked like? Him running out of the psychiatrist, the office, running outside of the building. In his homeroom, it looked like him opening up the window, putting out the teacher's chair, and sitting outside because he was hot, eloping
Mm,
out of the window. In the theater, it's him jumping off of the stage, running over there, and going through the building. And his other classroom is running from the back of the room into the library, into the other room. So, depending on the teacher and depending on the behavior, it's going to look different of the
exactly.
type of support, right? So when it comes to that, it's like having a under like and also too making sure that everyone on the team is
Mm,
heard. Okay. Because and it's like, okay, well, he only has theater arts on Thursdays. So okay, well, that theater arts teacher is petrified of this learner on Thursday. So wouldn't you want to hear
mm,
his science show how to support him in
exactly.
his classroom? You know what I mean? So it's like making sure everyone on the team is heard and understanding like how to individualize the support for them in their classroom because everything looks different. It's not
True.
just black and white, it's more than that.
This was
Ugh.
amazing.
I
Yes,
hope
you
I answer your
did.
question.
I know I learned a lot, and I am 100% sure whoever is going to listen to the podcast is going to learn too. And even if they already know a lot, it's always good to just go back to these topics and just understand a little bit more, understand, a different perspective. You are your own person, you are your own professional. And it's always good to know that because we are such a small community, it is important that we all have our own opinions, and we can all hear everyone, and there's a safe space for that.
Hmm.
So I really, really loved having you here. Thank you, Christina, so much for joining us. It's like been such an honor to finally sit down with you and talk a little bit more. But for our listeners, where they can find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on social media, guys. So you could hashtag ABA Made Easy with an E and a Z at the end. And all my handles are ABA dot made easy. So I'm on Instagram, on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, my website, abamadeeasy.com. So I'm pretty much on social
Amazing.
media. So you can just
Any
hashtag
new
me and I'll pop
exciting
up.
things for 2025 that you can speak about?
Yes, I'm actually gonna be launching our
Oh,
podcast too.
nice.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's called Reinforcing
Love it.
Conversations. So me and Nicole Stewart are gonna be launching that very soon. We're actually going live tomorrow on Instagram to talk more about that. So that's one of my big projects for this year. And then also too, like
Hmm.
offering more mentorships. And then starting to build like my little sister page called aba.scholars to really focus
Uh-huh.
on the grad students specifically. But for the most part, those are some of the goals
Well,
for ABA Made Easy and hosting.
I
I like
I mean, it
hosting and
already said
advertising
it
and all that
already
stuff.
looks like your schedule is pretty full, but knowing you, you're going to be working hard because that's just who you are as an entrepreneur, and I admire you for that. So, Christina, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in to hear this episode. It was a pleasure having you, and we'll keep in touch for sure. And thank you guys so much for joining, and see you on the next episode of Motivators Podcast.
Yay! Thanks,
Bye,
Motivity.
Christina.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Mark. That was so much
It was.
fun.